Alrighty, as promised, we are out here. Bonus, you get us on the front porch tonight. As I said, we're now starting summer schedule. Peggy had to leave because she's got 3 more days.
2 more days.
2 more days now. Wow, the cat's even back there. You can see the cat hanging out back on the table. Today was my first 10-hour day, so we're going to jump into 1 Corinthians 7 now. So, what did you... this is a very long chapter, and it has a lot to deal with marriages and the various states of how you can serve God in either single or not single, or married or divorced, or...
Right. It almost seems like Paul is not a huge fan of marriage. But I think that that's because his mindset is all about planting churches. And he couldn't do that if he had a wife. It would be very difficult for him to travel to all of the places that he traveled if he had a wife. And then he would have to worry about her safety also, as he's getting arrested and beaten and stoned and everything else. That would be a huge burden to him to have to worry about a wife. So I think that's kind of why he's making the argument that if you can stand to not be married, then don't get married, because it divides your attention. But on the other hand, he has some pretty good advice if you do get married, and especially for the church in Corinth, because that was such a sexually active and sexually promiscuous city. So when he starts right off by saying that if you're going to get married, you should only have one wife, and you should only have one husband, and that's that. But if you can possibly stand to stay single, then do that. And then he goes on and he talks about divorce, and that's always really uncomfortable for me to read about because of my past and the things that I've had to grapple with. But the thing that struck me this time is that he rolls from that to the live as you're called portion. And in here he's talking specifically about circumcision, which was a huge deal back then because it delineated you between being a believer or a not believer in the Jewish faith, which then kind of rolled into the Christian faith for some people. But regardless of that, regardless of what your past is, and he also talks about being a bondservant, and we have lots of other examples from the people that Jesus was with. Regardless of your past and the scars that you may carry because of your past, live now, live as you're called. And we're called to be living our lives in a way that brings honor and glory to God. We're not called to continually beat ourselves up over mistakes in the past or decisions that were made in the past. The way that I read it, it would be very wrong if I would look at you and say, this isn't working out, I'm filing for divorce. That's not an option, and we've declared that that is simply not an option for us. But just because that has been in our past doesn't mean that we can't have a powerful present and future. Right? Kind of like they were stressing at the weekend to remember this last time. Even if this is not your first marriage, this can be your last marriage. And that's kind of how I think Paul is calling the people. Even though may not have been perfect up to this point, even though you may have scars or bumps or bruises. Don't focus on that. Focus on the choices that you're making now in the present and how you're moving forward.
One piece on 732 that I like. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord and how to please the Lord. And then he's contrasting the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. But he goes back and he says, I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. So, I think this is a very good passage to look back on and say, the way the world says, you know, you are my number one and you complete me, is the way of the world. And, you know, romance and everything is built upon those premises. But yeah, you're the one, but you alone cannot complete me. There's only one person who can complete me, and that's Jesus Christ. So if I put him who can complete me first and then put you second, doesn't make for a great Hallmark card in our society, but it is the most biblical way to live out our married life together. And I like that piece and coming back to that.
And just as a side note, if anybody would like to have more information on that theory or on that practice, Craig Groeschel has a great book. It's called Love, Sex, and Happily Ever After, and he goes into great detail about that whole the whole premise of putting God as number one and your spouse as number two.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts?
No, I think that in looking deeply at it, his whole big concern is that people have God first and that they live their lives being true to that instead of in duplicity.
Mm-hmm. So, that's our thoughts. Hit us up, share it out, let us know what you think. Thanks.